Alright guys, how's it going? I'm the Crown Fiend, and today we're doing What If Deku Was Magneto's Son, Part 2. So, let's get into a quick little recap, and then I'm going to cover some stuff before we jump into the next part of this episode. So, where we last left off, Deku, he had been cast out of Genosha because of Magneto and Pietro telling Wanda a lie that Deku was trying to protect the people that killed Vision. And yes, I know Vision is a synthoid, not a quirked person, but he still made of metal. And when Deku was getting beat for trying to save them, Vision wasn't there at first. He came later on to see where Magneto went and what was the commotion. And when he arrived and defied Magneto, he didn't get beat because Magneto just killed him on the spot. Like, a person who has metal in their body going against Magneto when he's in that state of mind is just not something that's going to happen. Like, he's just going to straight up kill you. It's not a debate. Like, the only reason Deku wasn't killed is because he's Magneto's son, and Magneto shows his kids tough love. But yes, that's the whole reason why Vision didn't die. And now to address another question. So, why are people who have quirks and people who are mutants different? So, how quirks came about, from what we know so far, is it's an evolutionary process. Mutants do evolve, but it's because they have a certain gene in their body called the X gene. And from what we know, there's no specific gene that a quirk inhabits. If I'm wrong, correct me down there below, but hey, from what I know. So, just because someone has superpowers but doesn't have the X gene doesn't make them mutants, because they're not. So mutants are only mutants because of that specific gene. You take out that gene, you take out their powers. Quirked people, you have to rewind their bodies back to their previous evolution state. That's what Ares Quirk, from Overhaul, the Quirk Destroying Bullets do. They do that. And yeah, that's the whole thing. But the reason why quirk people are different is because they evolved to that point, and mutants have a specific gene that gives them their power. So that's why. And just so you guys know the answer to this question, yes, people who do have mutation quirks are looked at a little bit differently and have a little bit of disdain thrown towards them. But since they're not fully mutants, like the X-Men or the Mutant Brotherhood or all that, they don't get the same bad treatment. They're treated badly, yes, but not as bad as mutants are. So, yeah. Anyways, let's continue with the recap. So, the recap, where we last left off, is Deku got cast out because Scarlet Witch threw him all the way across the ocean back into Japan, and he met up with Naomasa. Him and Naomasa got heated. All Might stepped in. Deku has been confirmed to be taken under the tutorage, and Mystique is fully responsible for him. Mystique is now his adoptive mother. And yes, because Mystique was part of the diet building of Japan, and she was the highest ranking member there, and they were about to vote on the Sentinel program to be reinstated. But since Mystique was there, she was able to kind of counteract them, saying that no, I've been here, I haven't made you guys do anything immoral. And they canceled the program, saying it's how they had a mutant in their own ranks. So yes, Deku, he's been training with Mystique, getting better in hand-to-hand combat. She has a slight edge because of her more flexibility and agility and her speed. That's the only slight edge she has over Deku, which makes it able for her to beat him when he's not using his powers. Now, for a more in-depth explanation of Deku's powers are able to control any mineral, which includes in the earth itself, like metal, and he can control it. If it's like 1,000 feet deep, he can still get to it. And what he's learning to do now is control the iron in people's bloods like Magneto does. He stops them in their brain, which freezes them. And yes, Magneto can do a lot of things. Just because he's the master of magnetism doesn't mean his powers are only metal. He has an electromagnetic field that he can put around objects like, say, plastic, and control it just fine because he incorporated an electromagnetic field around it. He can shoot blasts like Dragon Ball Z style that could easily destroy a mountain. So yes, Magneto has a lot of powers that most people don't know about, including his barriers, which have taken hits from Thor, Hulk, Hercules, yeah, even Spider-Man when he was imbued with the power cosmic. So yes, Magneto is very powerful, and Deku has all those powers plus mineral manipulation on that type of level. But he's not that powerful yet. He's got full control over metal, but it's just external metal, not metal inside of a person's body, not, the electromagnetic field that Magneto has. So he's still learning, because remember, it took Magneto decades to master all of that, and Deku is only 15, so he'll slowly unlock those powers as the story progresses. But anyway, let's get back into where we last left off. So we're picking up, and Setsuna starts her training with Mystique during the day, and she works during the night as Deku goes there, and basically he hangs around the store center till Setsuna gets off work, and they start getting a closer friendship. And Mystique is very happy that Deku's actually finally made a friend his own age, as Deku still remembers the two kids that he hung out with as a child, Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki. He still remembers them, and yes, Bakugo does know Deku's a mutant because Mitsuki did tell him. The only one who doesn't know out of that trio is Todoroki, but we'll get more into that later. So the deal is that Deku and Setsuna, they finish off the last 4 months, so they get there, and it's at the entrance exam time. Since Deku and Setsuna are walking together, Deku has really no reason to interact with anybody else whatsoever, which means he doesn't meet Uraraka at all at the beginning part, and they both go in there and they sit down, as Deku's just looking around, seeing how many people are actually going to show up for this thing, and Setsuna's sitting right beside him, and she's super nervous, but Deku's helped her with her academics part, so she's going to pass the test, be it not with an A, but a strong high B. So they're looking around, and Ida sees Deku just looking around as he's about to say something, but that's when Deku just stops looking, and he's just kind of bored. So Ida sits right back down as President Mike gets in there and states that, okay people, it's time for the exam. He explains all the rules of the exam. As the exam is given out, Deku, he easily passes it because it's nothing he doesn't already know. Like, he studied everything about this world underneath Magneto's tutorage, because Magneto's not going to have a kid of his being a complete and total idiot, especially one that he's personally raised himself. And Mystique's definitely not going to have Deku be, foolish to the ways of Quirk people in Quirk society. So she's making sure he's well informed on that. So Deku passes with an A, Setsuna passes with a B, like I said, as they're the first two done. Because of all of that, they get out there onto the field early, and they're the first ones at the gate. And they're just waiting as they're talking, and Setsuna's kind of laughing, cutting up, as Deku just has a kind of a smirk on his face. He's not really talking too much, because like I stated in the previous video, he's more reserved and quiet. He likes to let other people do the talking, but push comes to shove, he will state his mind. And everyone else starts coming out of there, as Bakugo is actually one of the people that's coming out, as he's actually quite loud, as Deku notices that he looks awfully a lot like his old childhood friend, Katsuki, as he tells Setsuna to give him a minute, as he tries to walk over to where Bakugo is, and that's when Ida actually gets in his way, as he says, hold up, you can't just go and try to pick a fight with another student, no matter how loud he might be, is Deku just says, "What are you talking about? I wasn't going to fight him. I want to talk to him." As Ida says, "You can't be interrupting other students as they're preparing for the exam." As Deku looks at Ida and says, "What are you doing to me then?" As Ida says, "I'm stopping you from interfering." As Deku just states, "No, you're being a royal pain in my ass. Perhaps it's time you leave." As Ida just says, "Is that a threat?" And Deku's just like, "Dude, I don't give a fuck about you. I think I might have known this kid in my childhood. It's been a while since I've been back in Japan. I need to talk to this kid to make sure it's him or I'm not hallucinating." Ida, he can kind of understand, but at the same time, he just says, "Get lost, dude. Like, the fuck is your problem? Thinking you might know somebody? No, you can ask him that after the exam. Don't try to hurt anybody's chances." As Ida actually pushes Deku back a little bit, and Deku just, like, looks at him, like, "Motherfucker, did you just push me?" And Ida's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." As Deku's like, "You just assaulted me." And everyone's looking at Ida, and Deku just says, "For someone who seems to be all about the rules, you don't mind breaking them when it's at your convenience, huh?" As Deku notices Ida's legs have metal in it, and since some of it is protruding out, he kind of just wipes Ida's legs out from under him, tripping him, because he puts the magnetic force on the parts of Ida's legs that sticks out as he pulls them away, and that's what causes Ida to trip. So Deku just walks past Ida and says, "I didn't know the ground was that slippery. Maybe you should be careful." As Ida's just like, "What just happened?" As everyone's just thinking, what is that kid's power? As Deku just walks up to Bakugo and says, "Are you somehow Katsuki Bakugo?" As Bakugo looks confused and says, "Yeah, who are you?" And Deku just smiles and says, "It's been a while, Kachan." As Bakugo kind of remembers back, and there was only one person that ever called him Kachan, and he says, "Deku?" And yes, Deku would still get the nickname because Bakugo would kind of tease him a little bit, but it wouldn't be to the degree that it was in canon. But Deku would say, "Yes, it's me." As Bakugo would give him a hug and say, "It's been forever, man. Where have you been all this time? I'm sorry about what happened to your mother. My mom told me everything." As Deku just says, "Now's not the time. I just wanted to check on you. But come, let us talk and get to the front. I have a friend waiting there for me." As Bakugo says, "Wait, have you seen Shoto lately?" As Deku's like, "No, I actually only got back to Japan 10 months ago." As Bakugo's like, "Wait, so you've been out of the country?" As basically, Deku just says, "Yeah, I've been away for a long time. I'll tell you everything in a little bit, but for now, let's just focus on this test." As Bakugo says, "That's alright. How about after this, we go out to eat my treat, and you can tell me everything that happened." And Deku's just like, "Sure. I'll show you what I can do now anyway." As Bakugo's like, "Wait, you actually got your power?" As Deku's like, "Yes. You'll be surprised." As Bakugo's just like, "Oh, I bet." So Bakugo meets Setsuna, and Setsuna's just like, "Oh, are you his childhood friend that he told me so much about?" As basically Bakugo says, "Oh, you've already told your girlfriend about me, huh?" As Deku says, "She's not my girlfriend," and Setsuna cuts in and says, "Not yet." As Deku just looks at her, and she says, "What? You didn't think there wasn't anything between us? We spent the past 4 months together. Really?" And Deku's just like, "I'm not gonna stop you, but at the same time, I will warn you. I'm not one for falling in love with." As Setsuna says, noted. So the gates open, and Deku immediately just starts lifting up the robots worth the most points and crushes them. As Bakugo's just like, whoa, metal manipulation? Deku says something like that, as he just throws the robots back, crushed, destroyed, and in pieces. As Setsuna rushes over there, and she uses more of her hand-to-hand combat capabilities that she learned from Mystique to hit the off switches on the robots, meaning she's taken them out. As Bakugo just explodes them, as Deku's just destroying enough to get him in. That way he leaves some for everybody else. But anyways, Nezu sees that all of the robots have been destroyed, and he's like, well then, let's call in the big gun. As Nezu just hits the button and the 0-pointer starts to come out. As Deku sees that giant robot, he gets a flashback to what Magneto was telling him and showing him on Genosha about the Sentinels, and about how they nearly wiped out most mutants, and the humans that helped them. And basically Deku immediately gets this rage building up in him from anything that has to do with Magneto or stuff like that, even though he knows it's not a Sentinel, because that program has been discontinued. He immediately just lifts up the 0-pointer as people are just looking at him in shock, seeing how he can lift something that big. As Nezu's watching, and he's just like, oh my. As Deku immediately starts to implode the 0-pointer as he's crushing it and causing it to combust on itself, taking its force and caving it in on itself until it's nothing but a small ball, as Deku keeps crushing it even smaller and smaller. As everyone sees this evil look on Deku's face, they all start to get scared as he just keeps on making it smaller and smaller and smaller till it's the size of a pebble. And Deku just spins it around so fast and shoots it as it goes straight through building after building after building. And people just look at him like, this kid is not one to be messed with. Bakugo is left stunned. Even Setsuna, who's never really seen him use his powers on that much of a big scale before, is completely shocked. Nezu is looking at Deku with great interest as he's just like, I want this kid. I have a good feeling about him. But all the other teachers are like, hell no, this kid is too off the wall. He's unstable. Look at what he just did to that thing. As Nezu says, he has the most points out of everyone here. Meaning, he gets in. This is my decision to make, not yours. I do not care for your opinions, and you will teach this kid. Do I make myself clear? As all of them say, alright. And that's when Aizawa walks up and says, I don't have a problem with the kid. I'll teach him. Put him in my class. As basically Nezu says, class 1A it is then. As basically everyone's looking down there and they see 3 promising prospects. As they see Deku, Setsuna, and Bakugo. And then Nezu gets a notification that the recommendation students have all gathered and are ready for inspection. As Nezu says, well, I must be going. Interview time for the recommendation students. So, yeah, he goes over there. And Todoroki is actually way more bitter in this timeline because he's heard that one of his childhood friends is dead or missing. And yeah, and Deku, his resurrection has been kept a secret. Nobody needs widespread knowing about Deku because they don't want that getting back to anybody that could potentially try to steer him off the path that they're trying to set him on. So, with that, Shoto doesn't know. So he's a lot more pissed off and quiet and reserved in this than in canon, because not only does he have to deal with his family drama, but one of his only friends is gone and he kind of distanced himself from Bakugo. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of stuff for that. And when after the recommendations over with, basically Bakugo and Deku are at this restaurant, and Shoto, he stops to get himself something to eat because he doesn't want to go immediately home. And that's when he sees Bakugo hanging out with a white-haired boy, and Shoto's eyes just grow wide, and he immediately runs over to Bakugo and says, "Katsuki, who is this guy?" As Bakugo just smiles and says, "It's Deku. He's alive." As Shoto's eyes just widen as Deku gets out of his seat, walks over to Todoroki, and Todoroki punches him straight in the face, saying, "If you were alive, where were you? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you let us know you were alive? We spent 10 years holding out hope for you, and when I finally lost hope, you're finally back. Is this some kind of sick, twisted manipulation tactic my dad put on you guys? Is this something that's supposed to make me go insane? Is this some kind of cruel joke that God's playing on me? Why? Where were you?" As Deku says, "I was about to explain that. If you'll refrain from punching me in the face, you're welcome to sit down and join us and listen to my explanation." As Todoroki sits down and says, "Fine, I'll at least hear you out." As Deku says, "Well, first thing you guys should know about me is that I am a mutant. I hope that doesn't affect your opinions on me." As Todoroki says, "I couldn't give a damn less. I knew your dad was a mutant, so it was a 50-50 chance that you would be one too." Bakugo says, "Yeah, we both kind of already suspected, and I knew since I was a kid, because, well, my mom told me after your mom hung up the phone with her that day." As Deku says, "Yeah, that fateful day. I guess I should start from there." As he explains everything in great detail, as Todoroki's eyes grow wide, tears start to fall down his face. Bakugo nearly throws up listening to all the things that Deku's had to go through. As Setsuna, who is actually hearing this straight from Deku, it hits her all the more. She's already known from Mystique about Deku's past, but she never thought it would be in this great of a detail that Deku would ever be explaining it, as it kind of makes her skin crawl a little bit hearing all the things that Genosha did and is going on in Genosha. As Bakugo just says, "I never thought your dad would lose it that bad." And Todoroki says, "Same. I am shocked. This isn't something that should have happened. Why? Why were police so late at getting there? If they would have just gotten there sooner, you would never have had to go through that. Your dad wouldn't have been on this path to kill all Quirk people. Your mother would still be alive. What the hell were the cops doing? What type of world do we live in?" And Deku tells them, "A world where mutant lives don't matter. After all, there's only 100 of us left in existence." As Bakugo and Todoroki immediately just say, "What do you mean, only 100? And Deku explains the events of the Apocalypse War, where Apocalypse came, the fighting that happened there, the Dark Phoenix rising, everything. And the final war of conflict, the one where the X-Men fought the Mutant Brotherhood. And after that, it left both sides severely weakened. And it cost the life of Magneto's long friend, Charles Xavier, who was already at the verge of dying because of his spinal cancer, but just could not let Magneto do what he was going to do, and that's what caused the war." As Bakugo and Todoroki look at each other, and they say, no matter what happens, we have your back. We'll always be here for you. We'll support you. You being a mutant doesn't have any effect on us. We grew up together. We know you. As Deku says, you knew the child I was before. You don't know the me who I am now. It'll take some time, but I will let you learn who I am once more. Just know I'm not the best at opening up. It took everything I had to tell you this without ripping this place apart. My powers are extremely vast, and I still don't know the full capability of them. In time I will, and I hope it's soon enough. As basically Setsuna starts explaining to them about what Mystique told her, about what they were trying to do with the Sentinel program, and how there are still some members of the world government and the United Nations that would still want to put the Sentinel project into action, but they're having a difficult time doing so without the funding that all of the nations would be able to give them. So it's not moving, but it's still an issue that's being pressed. They don't want any mutants living among them anymore after what Magneto did to that city. That day, as Deku asked, how did that day affect you two? Can you tell me? As Bakugo says, yeah, I'll tell you. I was at home with my mom as she was telling me the news, and then all of a sudden, our house, the metal started being ripped right off of it. As my father tried to protect us, he lost his life in that. I don't blame you, but I can't forgive your father for what he did. I understand the reasons that he did it, but it cost the life of my father. Like I said, I have no grudge against you, Deku, but I hate Magneto for what he did. As Deku says, I can understand that. Although I understand why my father did it, I often wonder if it really took that big of a scale to kill them. As Bakugo would say, yeah, I wondered that too. As basically Todoroki would say, well, my family was relatively unharmed since we weren't home that day. We weren't even within the city. We were visiting my grandparents who lived out in the country. And that's the only reason why we were spared that day. As he states that he's sorry for everything that happened to them both. And Deku asked him the big question. How did he get that scar? As Todoroki thinks long before saying a word. As Deku just sits there in silence, staring directly at Todoroki and saying, are you going to tell me? And Shoto says, I'm pretty sure there's some stuff you're not telling us, and like you, this is something I'm not really wanting to speak about right now. As Deku says, that's fair enough. I understand your reasoning. Something like that isn't easy to come back from. By the way, what school are you going to, Todoroki? As Todoroki says, UA. As Bakugo and Deku say, we are too. As Todoroki says, with any luck, we'll all be in the same class. Bakugo says, yeah, with any luck. As they start to just go their separate ways. The weeks pass, and it's actually time for Deku to get his acceptance letter. He does, except it's not All Might on there. It's the principal, Nezu. As he says that, welcome. I've made sure you were welcomed into UA. And I hope you don't mind. But even though this is a pre-recorded message, I did some digging into your background. While it was a lot of red tape and a lot of blacked out documents, I did get the gist, and I know that you're a mutant. And I just want to let you know this right now. As a person with a mutated quirk, I understand some of the pain that you went through. And I will make sure no one will discriminate against you while on this school property or at any school event. I promise you that. Show me the hero you can be. As always, welcome to UA. I look forward to seeing how big of a plus ultra mark you'll make. And Deku gets really pissed that someone went snooping around his background as he crushes the disc. As Mystique says, "What the hell?" as Deku tells her what was on the disc, and Mystique says, "I see. I will make sure to address that with the government when we meet. So, until then, calm down. It's not something that you have to be all up in a big twist about. More people are going to find out you're a mutant anyways. Might as well not even let it get to you. And always remember this: mutant and proud." As Deku looks at her and says, "You're still saying that?" Mystique says, "I have to. After all, it's the only thing that keeps me going these days. As bad as things may get, just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean they're lost forever. There's always hope. And my son, I need you to hope again. This world needs you to hope again. Hope that mutants and quirk people can coexist peacefully." As Deku says, "It's going to take a lot," and Mystique puts her hands on his shoulders and says, "I know it's going to take a lot. Trust me. I know. It took a lot for me to accept these people after what happened to Charles, to Eric, to Hank, all the people I cared about. Trust me. It takes a long time, but you'll eventually get past this, and you'll eventually be stronger for it. All of their pain, all of the misery in this world, if you allow yourself to feel it, it can make you stronger. But only if you allow yourself to feel it and let it pass through you. Don't hold on to it. Feel the pain of every mutant in existence. Feel the pain of all the quirked people who have mutation quirks. Feel the pain of everyone around you. Let it pass through you and let it strengthen you." Magneto is a great person at his core, but his ideals and the ways he goes about to achieve them have always caused him to stray from the right path. We don't need you to do that. So please, when you go to this school, have hope that people will accept you. Have hope that people will follow you. Have hope that people will respect you. And have hope that you can learn to live together with these people who you're going to have to share a future with. As Deku says, "I don't know if I can, but I'll give it my best shot. For my mother's." As he hugs Mystique and says, "Thank you. Once again, you've helped me out of a tough spot. And once again, I owe you a lot." Mystique says, "You don't owe me anything. After my son died, I never thought I'd be given the chance to be a mother again. You've given me that chance. So thank you." As Deku asks, "Who is your son?" She says, "His name was Quirk, but you'll easily find him as Nightcrawler." As Deku says, "And how did he die?" She says, "You don't want to know. it wasn't a pretty sight. As Deku says, I understand. So, the day comes for the first day of school, and Deku is immediately the first one there because he doesn't want to be late and he kind of wants to visit the principal's office before he goes into his own homeroom. So he goes to see Nezu, as Nezu's surprised to see him there, as he says, "Oh, is there a problem already?" As Deku just says, "Just wanted to talk a little bit here." As he makes the door shut behind him, and Nezu's just like, "Well, you're certainly not one to shy away from using your powers," as Deku says, "Don't really need to at this school, right? After all, you encourage us to use our powers." As Nezu says, "That's correct. Any and all people who come to this school and use their powers are welcomed. So I have to ask you this. Are you going to be a problem?" As Deku says, "No, not at all. I just came to ask you why you went snooping around my file, even though you must have seen all the government's warnings on not to enter this file, all the blacked out pages on my file, and all the other red tape. What made you want to keep digging?" As Nezu says, "The people I'm connected with were interested in you. They wanted to know who you were and if you were like them." As Deku says, "What do you mean, like them?" As Nezu just says, "You'll see in the coming days, but for now, please go to your homeroom class and meet your teacher, if he's not asleep." As Deku just says, "Sure. One more thing. If there's anything you want to know, don't go snooping behind my back. You ask me, or I'll tear this entire school apart." Nezu says, "Is that a threat?" And Deku just looks at him and says, "No. It's a promise." As he starts walking off, he enters his class and notices he's not the first one there anymore. There's quite a few people that have walked in. As he looks around, he sees Bakugo. He smiles. He sees Todoroki. He smiles even more. And that's when someone hugs him from behind as he turns around and sees Setsuna. As he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she says, "I'm in your class." As he's like, "Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think that we would be." And she's like, "Why?" As he's like, "Don't know. I didn't think you stood out that much just using your hand-to-hand combat capabilities." And she says, "That's why I stood out so much. As someone who didn't need to use their quirk to rack up the points, it's kind of impressive, right?" As Deku says, "Sure." And Setsuna is taking the place of Mineta. So yeah, no Mineta. As they walk in, as Deku meets with Bakugo and Todoroki, and then he sees Ida. And he's just like, "Oh Lord, this kid." As Ida walks up to him and says, "I'm sorry about the confrontation we had at the entrance exam. It was my fault for escalating things. Although, why don't you tell me your powers?" As Deku just says, "Mineral manipulation." As Ida's just like, "Oh, mineral manipulation." Deku's like, "Yeah, don't think too much of it." As Ida's like, "Sure. Just don't go using your powers on me anymore, and we'll be fine." And Deku says, "As long as you keep your hands to yourself, we will be. Now then, if we're done having this pissing contest, I would like to be talking to my friends, so if you could go piss off, that'd be great." As basically, Ida says, "Alright, just watch yourself. I already know what you are, mutant." As he just walks off, as Bakugo grabs Ida and punches him straight in the face and says, "The fuck do you say, Four Eyes? If you got a problem with mutants, then you got a problem with me, bitch." As basically Ida's just like, "Oh, what, you a mutant too?" As Shoto walks up and says, "No, we're quirked, but you're not gonna hate on someone that's like a brother to us, mutant or not, understand?" And Bakugo starts letting off explosions as Shoto starts letting off ice vapor. Ida realizes these are two of the people that got in and have the potentially strongest quirks. As Ida's just like, "If you're gonna throw your lot in with him, then don't even bother associating with me." As Aizawa demands for everyone to stop what they're doing, as Bakugo is sent to the principal's office, as well as Ida. And Todoroki is sat down and given a stern talking to. As, Deku's just looking and he tells Todoroki he's sorry that he's causing so much trouble. As Aizawa hears that and he says, "No, you don't need to apologize. I'm going to make this clear. I don't give a damn who you guys are, and I don't give a fuck what you think. Mutant or quirk, it doesn't matter. You're all treated the same here. So, if you guys want to keep on making discriminatory comments about people, then you can go right the hell out of this classroom and leave this fucking school and never come back, because I swear, if I have to make this statement again, I will expel the majority of this class. Do I make myself clear?" And everyone says, "Crystal." As they look at Deku, and most of the class is kind of just already mad at him just because they've been threatened with expulsion because of he being who he is. As Deku just decides to just sit there and not talk anymore. As basically Aizawa says, "Alright, everybody, with that out of the way, get up, head down to the changing room, get changed. We're going to have a quirk assessment." And basically they ask about orientation, and Aizawa just says, "What did I just say? We're having a quirk assessment. Quit lollygagging and stop bitching about orientation this, orientation that. We only have a few months to turn you guys into heroes." Scratch that. I know we got a few years, but still, a few months here and there, because at the end of the day, you guys will have the majority of schoolwork. Hero studies comes secondary. So if you tally all that time up, we roughly have a few months to a year and a half. So, get out there and do as I say. Oh, and one more thing. Anyone who doesn't get a hero rating is immediately expelled from this class. And that's when Setsuna starts to worry, as Deku says, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." As Setsuna says, "Okay." So, they all get changed, and in the changing room, Bakugo and Ida come back during that time, as Bakugo just says he's been given a warning, and Ida says same to him. And Ida is being forced to apologize to Deku about that comment, and Deku just says, "Just stay away from me." As basically Bakugo just says, "Man, you're way too calm about this shit." But then he sees just how clenched Deku's fist is, and he's like, "Never mind, forget I said anything." Deku's like, yeah. So Deku just walks out of the changing room, and he's the first one out, and everyone starts talking shit about him, as they're just like, "Man, already being threatened with expulsion because of that mutant." And that's when Shoji just speaks up and says, "Hey, don't just talk bad about him, man." And Tokiyami says, "Yeah, you guys can't just talk shit about somebody just because of who they are." As they're just like, "Oh yeah, look at them, the two mutated fuckers. Look, sticking up for a mutant. You know, you might not get it as bad as mutants do, but you're still freaks." As basically, and the one that's saying that is Kaminari. And Bakugo just walks up to Kaminari and says, "If there is ever an opportunity for me to beat your ass and get away with it, you best rest assured I will take it. And basically Kaminari just says, oh yeah, right, I could just zap you with 1,000,000 volts right here and you'd be done. As Bakugo just says, wanna try it? As basically Aizawa comes in and says, what's taking so long? As everyone says nothing. As they get changed, and Kaminari is looking at Bakugo with a vicious just scowl, as he just sees Bakugo as a no good mutant sympathizer. As basically Deku's just out there, as Aizawa throws him the ball, because most of the girls are already done, as they didn't really have that talk, because at the end of the day, most of the girls are cool with Deku being a mutant, because the majority of them don't really care. They haven't had any negative experiences with a mutant, and they have mutation quirked friends, so yeah, they're pretty cool with Deku. And honestly, most of the guys are too. It's just a select few that are really just hating him because they don't want to get expelled. It's just because of that whole deal with Ida. So Ida's on everybody's shit list as well. And yeah, so they get out there and they see Deku holding the ball, as Deku says, so physical strength or powers allowed? As Aizawa says, powers are allowed and encouraged. How else are you going to get a hero rating? As Deku says, very well. So the ball is made of metal in this one. So Deku, he's manipulating the ball as he gets ready, and he just hurls it. And he shoots that ball into space. Like, it's not that heavy or dense, so he has really good control over it, and the ball goes clear into orbit. And Aizawa says, infinity. And everyone's just like, yeah, what if the ball wasn't made of metal? As Deku says, well, as long as it's made of some type of mineral, I can control it. As they're just like, oh, okay then. Next up is Bakugo, as Bakugo throws it, and he actually gets his cannon deal, as everyone's just like, whoa, that's actually pretty impressive. As everybody else goes, they all get their cannons, and now it's time for Setsuna. As Setsuna, she pretty much throws it, and with her quirk, she honestly just has to rely on brute strength. So she doesn't get it that far, but she does get far enough for Aizawa to be satisfied. And he's just like, with work, and I know your quirk's not best for this, so won't hold it against you. But as for like sprinting, Setsuna's actually pretty fast, so she's actually above everybody else in the class, so she feels like she is safe. Like, she got one good record, so she's pretty safe. As Deku's just like, you really are. As pretty much Ida's just looking around at everybody, and he's just like, I can't believe it. Like, everyone's just getting along with this guy. What is it about him that makes people want to get along with him? And that's when Kaminari walks up and says, I don't know, man. But honestly, this is just some bullshit. As pretty much just, they hear a voice, and they look around, as they can't really see anybody. And then they see this girl appear out of a wall, as she says, hi there. My name's Kitty. Kitty Pride. Pleasure to meet you guys. As she says, and it's a real pleasure to meet you in particular. As Deku's like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you're a mutant, and it's really good to meet you. I'm part of the X-Men, well, previous X-Men. Kind of running things solo at the moment, so we can get them back together. But we'd like to offer you the chance to come with us and learn from us. And Deku, he thinks about it, and he says, give me a few days. I need to make sure it's the right thing to do. As pretty much Bakugo and Todoroki can understand why Deku would want to go and learn from the X-Men and learn from all of their teachings and everything like that. But at the same time, they don't want their best friend to just leave. So this is where I'm ending it off, and I'm posing the question for you guys right now. Should Deku go and learn from the X-Men or stay at UA? Whichever way you guys decide will drastically change the outcome of the story. So, with that, I'm the Crown Fiend. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.